The way to end discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discrimination on the basis of race. We've got to get out of this business of racial bean counting, quotas, etc. We've got this other crisis, and I've talked about it before, which is the left's attack, long-standing attack on the rule of law when it comes to the equal protection of the law. The left likes to pretend they're against discrimination. In fact, they embrace discrimination. They love it. The left likes to think they're against systematic racism or systemic racism, and they smear all of America saying they're systemic racist, when in fact the only systemic racism that I'm aware of in the American system is in the college admissions programs that have been blessed, unfortunately, by courts that grant special preference to people based on race, an absolute violation of the Constitution and civil rights laws. And the fact that we're still fighting about this in the year 2022 tells you just how decrepit the left is on the morality and the constitutionality of discrimination that they pretend they're against when in fact they advocate for. And the biggest case in that regard is going to be held, I shouldn't say the biggest case, a major case potentially on the order of, it's so significant that it may actually overturn this whole racialism in admissions at the college level, is coming up and will be considered by the Supreme Court this term, or I should say next term in October, when they will hear two cases concerning racial admission policies at the Harvard and the University of North Carolina. And Judicial Watch has been filing amicus briefs trying to get the court to take these cases, and finally they did. We filed another amicus brief advocating for the rule of law here and against the left's racial quota system, essentially, that is ruining higher education. And Judicial Watch highlighted, and this is something that the court itself has to grapple with, just as it grappled with the outrageous Roe decision, there have been decisions by the Supreme Court that have outrageously pretended that discrimination is okay if it's for diversity's sake. And I encourage you to read our briefs here, because they go through to this decision, or go back to this decision, the Bakke decision, B-A-K-K-E, that just kind of threw everything up in the air. And since then, the Supreme Court and lower courts, I think it's 26 cases we go through, have tried to grapple with the inherent contradiction of the Supreme Court trying to mesh the prohibitions on racial discrimination in the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution and the various civil rights statutes with the fact that colleges and other places were just radically opposing them and ignoring them by saying that race counts and should be taken into account when considering someone for admission. And if you're the wrong race, in the case of Harvard, Students for Fair Admission were highlighting the targeting of Asian Americans and Asians. You got the short end of the stick. So when the left says they support minorities, they don't. They don't support minorities. They support some minorities sometimes and discriminate and are happy to have processes and procedures that discriminate against other minorities. It depends on what's happening to who and when. And of course, this pernicious racialism, it's part of this critical race theory approach that, again, that America is flawed because it's fundamentally racist. It's a Marxist attack on our system. And they pretend it can be fixed by racism and promotion of racism, treating people according to race as opposed to according to merit. And we saw this, and I encourage you to read the brief because we go through and expose the Supreme Court's enabling of this racialism. But we highlight how it's spread, and it's spread, critical race theory and all of that. And we talk about and highlight, and I'm going to read you a portion of the brief in this regard. The fact that it's spreading to all areas of government. If this court fails to reverse the Bakke line of cases I've talked about, the pro-discrimination line of cases, their flawed reasoning will corrupt the race-neutral application of the law in other areas. That this is already happening to a considerable extent, and it can be seen in the explicit effort to replace the goal of equal opportunity with that of racially proportional outcomes. Some of the Biden administration's executive orders, for example, have replaced the term equality with the term equity. Thus, Executive Order 13985, issued January 20th, 2021, is entitled Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Underserved Communities Through the Federal Government. In that executive order, the term equity is mentioned 21 times and the term equality is not mentioned at all. On June 25th, 2021, Biden issued an executive order entitled Executive Order on Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility in the Federal Workforce. On October 19th, 2021, Biden issued an executive order entitled White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Black Americans. Indeed, Vice President Harris has explained the difference between equity and equality this way. There's a big difference between equity and equality. Equality suggests everyone should get the same amount. The problem with that, not everybody's starting out from the same place. Equitable treatment means we all end up in the same place. So typically, that's a Marxist approach. Equality generally means, look, you all have access. You should not be denied access and denied opportunity based on race. Equity means you should be given things based on race. You should be given favoritism based on race. Equity equals discrimination. It's anti-American, it's un-American. It's anti-constitutional, it's unconstitutional. As we note in the brief, there is no constitutional guarantee that we all end up in the same place. These statements that we go through reveal a distorted view of the Equal Protection Clause that would guarantee racially proportionate outcomes under the name of equity, but not the equality of opportunity the Equal Protection Clause is always guaranteed. These are more than mere words or theories. Racial preferences have increasingly become incorporated in real-world governmental decisions and policies. So these aren't just executive orders. The Biden Agriculture Department recently sought to use race as a basis for deciding who receives a government loan, who receives a forgiveness for government loans, based on race. Completely outrageous. I think that was thrown out on the basis of the fact it was racist and discriminatory. New York issued guidelines identifying criteria to govern which COVID-19 patients are eligible to receive life-saving monoclonal antibodies and therapeutics. The criteria included that the patient be a person of color or Hispanic ethnicity. So access to life-saving medical treatment based on your race? Yeah, and then we go on to say that this racialism is so destructive of the American way of life and so divisive. Increasing the number of minority admittees does not compensate for the constitutional injury inflicted on innocent individual applicants from non-preferred racial groups who are not admitted, and the harm that the injury does to race relations generally. Legalizing the use of race in deciding who is admitted to schools of higher learning has caused enormous conflict in our society, including among even members of the Supreme Court. Justice Thomas' concern about the creation of racial resentment caused by race preferential admissions programs echoes the first Justice Harlan's concern about the seeds of race hatred being planted under the sanction of law by the segregated seating practices at issue in Plessy. So Plessy versus Ferguson is the infamous Supreme Court decision that blessed segregation. And now we have these modern Supreme Court line of cases that also bless racial discrimination by the government and its agents, namely higher education. Justice Thomas and Justice Harlan understand that non-preferred applicants become resentful when they learn that they were discriminated against. By prohibiting racial discrimination, the Equal Protection Clause reduces race-based discord and engenders unity. Our Constitution, when followed, everyone, remember, engenders unity. That's why the left hates the Constitution. They want disunity. They want to destroy and divide America. So when the Equal Protection Clause is interpreted to allow racial discrimination, I would say misinterpreted, the lawyers don't run the briefs by me before they file them typically. So when the Equal Protection Clause is interpreted to allow racial discrimination, the statutory purpose is diminished, if not destroyed. So they say they're diminishing racial discrimination by engaging in racial discrimination. This destructive cycle of race preference and resentment must be ended for the sake of national unity. Do you agree? I agree. And I suspect there's going to be at least 5 justices of the Supreme Court that agree. Chief Justice Roberts famously said, and it's worth quoting, frankly, every weekly update. Every time you talk about this online, I encourage you to quote Chief Justice Roberts. The way to end racial discrimination, or the way to end discrimination on the basis of race, is to stop discrimination on the basis of race. We've got to get out of this business of racial bean counting, quotas, etc. We want our government to treat everyone equally. The left doesn't. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.